Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week on the Cyclekart I'm working on the steering wheel boss. See you in a minute. Okay, I'm moving on to the metalwork for the steering wheel now. I've got the quick release boss that I bought for the actual column itself. So that's going to be the foundation for the whole thing. That just comes apart like that. Now I bought some new screws for it the other day because these were an odd, I think it was a UNC size. I wanted a countersunk one, and that will become apparent in a minute why that was. I've got spokes to go in the wheel. I've got a boss which I'm going to make out of two. These are tabletop fittings that I got from the from eBay. They've got an M10 threaded on the back, and they're what you rest glass tabletops on furniture. But they are about the right size to go on as a boss on that quick release hub. So I need to get the lower one of the two. I need to drill that with 3 holes in it at those centres, countersink the holes, and then that will fix to the hub, and that will form the bottom of a sandwich. I've also got to determine now whether I'm going to house the spokes in the bottom, sandwich between the two, or in the top of these pair of fittings. But effectively I'm going to router grooves about 3mm apart, 3mm in depth and width, and they'll go right the way through the middle of the steering wheel like that, and they will hold the spokes in one direction. And then when that is routed out, the boss will go on top and squash them flat, and it'll probably be epoxied in as well, and that should hold the whole thing together with probably 4 bolts or 4 machine screws in the corner just going through. There's also, I've got to bear in mind that there are ones going the other way as well. There are spokes going the other way, so I've got to try and make sure I've got some fixing, decent fixing on all of those. So there's a little bit of work to be done on that as to spacing and how that works and how the routering takes place. It might be a bit closer than 3mm, I don't know yet. But the other spokes will just be coming in, and they will effectively just be fixed into the rim, into the hub like that, either side. But certainly the main ones either side, I think, which is where most of the stress will go right through, and they'll attach to the inside of the wheel. I'll cut all of these out, and there'll be a slot cut into there which will be big enough to hold all 3 of those. And again, they'll be held either side by the timber work going either side of it. It'll all be epoxied up, so I think it'll be strong enough from that point of view. So the first job is to get this bottom one, and I think I'll do it on the bottom one, in a state where I can router the grooves out. And to do that, I'm just going to drill a hole in it through the 8mm and fix it with a screw or a bolt to a piece of ply, so that the thing has got a firm base and is flat and square. And then I'm not sure whether I'll either do it with my little lathe upstairs running through there, or whether I'll turn it upside down and run it through the router table, but at least it'll be fixed in that position. And I've also got to measure out the 3 dots for the screw fixing where it fixes onto the boss, and I'll do that at the same time, countersink those. So that's the first stage done, and as with these things, the design evolves as you go along. I've realised now that by the time I've put the bolts in that hold this to the boss, there is no way that the steering wheel itself and the spoke parts are going to fit within that I can router that out. So that's going to have to go into the top part of it. I've drilled out the centre hole as well, and that will take a bolt which will go in from the inside, and that will then, once that is part of the steering wheel, that will then just bolt to it, and you'll just be able to do it up from the inside, and that will clamp it tight. So that will give me what I want, I think, with the steering wheel boss. It's very slightly, the countersinks on the bolts that have gone in there, the countersunk bolts are very slightly protruding from the side there, so I might have to just smooth those over, but I think I'm pretty well okay with that, and that'll all be hidden behind spokes and all sorts of other stuff, so that's good, I think. So we've got the first part done. We now move on to getting this routering done for these spokes on the wheel itself. Okay, so I'm just going to do my usual favourite trick with super glue and masking tape, just to secure the one half of the boss for the steering column. This will be the bit that holds the spokes to a piece of wood, bit of plywood, bit of scrap, put a bit of accelerator on that, just burnish down the masking tape, and all I need to do is just centre that on there, so that I'm happy with it being in the middle. Once that's there, a couple of seconds, that will stick, and that will give enough adhesion for it to go through the router. That's now on there really solidly, bearing in mind all the forces are in shear, it's not that it's pulling away. That will now be put face down on the router table against the fence of the table, and the bit of the router will be a 3mm, I'm guessing, bit sticking up, or 1/8 of an inch, which is more accurate, I think, sticking up out of the router table by probably only 1mm or so, and I'll just push that through, and that will cut a groove right down the middle of the steering column boss, and I'll just carry on going up and up with the router bit until that's gone in to about 3mm. So that'll give me the centre spoke. Now, because this is in the middle, what I should be able to do then is to get a packing piece, which is the distance of part of the spokes plus the thickness of a spoke, up against that fence, and then I'll push it through again, and that will put me another second line just to one side. And if I turn that round, same again, and then we'll put another spacer in, do the same again, and that should give me 5 grooves all the way through the middle that are going through there. Now, what I'm also going to do is to cut this off now with the chop saw, and cut it so that the ends are exactly the same distance apart there and there. So this will be a square block, and it means that I can turn it 90 degrees and do the same thing, and that should give me a grid of slots for the spokes all the way across, and they should all be nice and regular, and I can then glue spokes into there. Now, before I take the wheel apart from its initial rough turn shape, I want to make sure that I lock it into the right position, so that when I put it all back together again, everything will work right. I've got positions marked where I'm going to put the brass studs through. I was originally going to put them there and halfway between, but if I do that again I'm risking this interfering with where the spokes will go. So I'm putting 2 of them on the 45 degrees apart, just either side of the hub where the spokes will be. So I've marked those out. I'm using the old original thing that I cut this aluminium out on, so it's just, you know, reusing these things. I want to be able to put it back in the same position, so I'm going to put some blocks of wood, just bond them, glue them down there and there like that, so that it'll hold it in the right position, because once I cut this middle out, the midpoint of the wheel will be lost effectively. But if I leave it in this jig, I've got the midpoint from when I did the original turning of the outside rim. So that's that established. I'm just marking the points at which I'll need to set it back. So I'm going to have to put something on the wheel somewhere to coincide with these radial spokes, and I can do that once I start and take the wood off. I've got to mark the wood to make sure it's in the right place, and I've also got to mark the wheel so that I know where it goes back. And I don't want to just use a pen for that, because by the time I've finished cutting and grinding and sanding these surfaces ready for taking epoxy, I'll have lost any marks. So I'll just put punch marks in. But at the moment that's set up for a position I know and want it to be in. So I'll just take the first piece off, and then from then on I can just mark and go all the way around. It's just starting to go now. Got to be careful that I don't want to break it, but it should come up okay. There we go. Just work along. See, that comes off cleanly. Masking tape just peels off. Could use double-sided tape, but I find that double-sided tape leaves a residue usually, whereas the masking tape doesn't. Comes off more cleanly. But now I'll just put a punch mark on there of like number 1. Put a mark on the outside edge where number 1 is, and I'll mark the back of this with a felt tip pen, and we'll just work our way all the way around this side. And again, I need a front and a back because these are discrete to that side now, and hopefully we'll be able to put it all back together again when we need to get to do the final finishing. Just fettling the slots out a bit now, but it's pretty much there now. The bars will go in through there. 2 of them will go right the way across. The middle one can't because of the bolt going through the middle, but there'll be 3 there. And what I've decided is, because that is the only thing that ties the whole of the steering wheel together across that way, the smaller bars that are coming out the other way, if I can find one, will come out through there, but there's less purchase there again as well, so there'll be slightly less strength in it that direction. But because there's so little in the corner in the fifth one, I've decided to put a right angle bend in a spoke, and that will be the one that goes there, and that will of course tie the side of the wheel into the bottom of the wheel on 4 corners. So I'm hoping that'll brace it all up enough to work well, and then the back will bolt through, clamp all of that together, and we'll be ready to go. So I'll just finish fettling this up and we can start and assemble the hub. That's laid the spokes out on the wheel reasonably well. They're all loose at the moment, but it'll need a bit of fettling once they're all glued in properly. But that should provide a reasonably strong grip, I think, on everything. There's not a great deal of strength in the corner pieces, but they are after all spanning from there to there as well, so they should help. There are 2 running straight the way across, which I'll probably have on the side to side normal time, and then everything else has unfortunately got to be broken to make it work. But I think by the time it's clamped sufficiently hard between the 2 discs and flooded with epoxy, I think we should be okay. And then I'll just do the final bending to get the spokes coming into the wheel in the right place. I've just laid a piece of rim on just to get a rough idea on how that'll be, but I'll have to cut out the aluminium now to leave that all coming together in one place. And hopefully if we just leave a little bit of room like that either side, there'll be some strength in the aluminium that'll be glued to the rims. That'll be cut out and again flooded with epoxy. I think the important thing now is to get the rim, the boss all glued up and solid and flooded with epoxy, and then we can, as I say, start and fettle where it joins the rim and things like that. There are 4 bolts on the centre of the wheel hub, steering wheel hub, and I've just drilled that. I've got a problem in that you can't put 4 holes and bolts through onto something that's got 3 holes in it. It doesn't quite work out, but I'm quite happy to use 3. I've got one there and one there. That'll give me plenty, bearing in mind there's also a big one coming through the centre. That'll still give me 4 fixings. The aim is to clamp the spokes rather than anything else. I've drilled so that they fall within gaps between where the spokes are. I'll drill those out, 3 of them 6mm clearance and 1 of them about 5mm to tap 6mm, so there'll be a dummy bolt in one of them where it goes against the hardened screw, and then the other 3 will just drill through and tap those out at, I think it's 5mm or thereabouts to tap, and then that way we can clamp the 2 parts together. So I can then go and stick all the spokes into this area and get a resin bed on it. I'm going to stick them on with resin or epoxy of some sort, and then when I've done that I'm going to put like a dam all the way round, including the spokes, so that there's a little bit of, because the spokes come up slightly higher, put a little dam all the way around and then flood the whole thing with epoxy apart from the centered bolt, and then I can sand it flat when the spokes are glued in, and it'll just give me a plain smooth surface at the bolt to the clamp on the other one. So we'll start and drill these out bigger and drill the tapping sizes. All I'm trying to do at the moment is just essentially get them in the right place and located, and then once that's done we can worry about getting it properly secured. Just needs that initial shape. It. Just got to make sure we don't stick the whole of the boss down to the table now. That's the next thing to worry about. I should have put this on a piece of greaseproof paper or something as a barrier between the two. But I think what I might do is lift. Don't know. We'll worry about it when we got it dry, I think. Probably we'll come up with a chisel. So that's the hub done. It needs a bit of cleaning up with getting bits of resin off the spokes, but epoxy. But at the moment that is now really solid. That will take the rim of the wheel quite happily. And it really wasn't, as I said before, the centre that I was too worried about. It's how that incorporates into the rim. But it's got some good strength in that already. So there we are, that's got the steering wheel boss done. I'm happy with that. A little bit of work still to do. A couple of compromises I've got to do with regard to scaling things down. I wanted this to be an 80% replica. And as I may have mentioned before, there are some metal parts on the Blumels wheel which come in about there across it to hold the spokes. I'm not sure, but I think that may have to go. I'm not too certain about it, but I think that's probably not going to work. We will have a go at it, but see. And then the other thing is there is the 4 bolts on the wheel itself. There is then on the real wheel another disc in the middle of that, and again I think that will be something that I can't really scale down. So other than a clean up, that is pretty much there now. It's got to be attached to the rim. That'll be the next thing I do when I get back onto the steering wheel. That'll be in a week or two's time. So I hope that was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be doing something different on the Cyclekart. I'll see you then. Bye.